For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss Ubuntu between a warder and a prisoner. Welcome, Professor.
Morning.
In this account of your relationship with Sergeant Joubert, are you suggesting that this was a manifestation of Ubuntu?
Yeah, I didn't use the word Ubuntu. There is also an Afrikaans word, menselijkheid, which means something similar to Ubuntu. I'm slow to use that word because it doesn't have one meaning. It comes from a proverb which says, person is a person because of other people, and it's a Nguni proverb, but it's similar proverbs are found in Shona and other languages. But not everyone understands it the same way. That's why I was careful. When Archbishop Tutu used it, he's not using it the same way as Ubuntu Armed Response, or Ubuntu Financial Services, or Ubuntu Catering. These other businesses are using the word Ubuntu in order to attract customers because they think this is a word that resonates with people. People say, you know, please don't do this. Have some Ubuntu and what. Also, you have management courses and leadership courses in business schools where they teach Ubuntu, and what they mean by that is that instead of having conflict between labor and business, you find a way of a good relationship, and you get away from what the unions want, which is to struggle for a better wage. Instead, you overlay this word Ubuntu, which makes just peace. Now, sometimes you don't want peace because you want to secure something that the bosses don't want to give you. So I was reluctant to use the word Ubuntu because of all these reasons, amongst others. The word is supposed to have an obvious meaning, and I don't abandon the word Ubuntu. I believe it's very important to advance a concept of respect for one another, caring about one another. So I will advance my own meaning, but I didn't want to just put it down there without explaining what I mean, and that's why I left it out. What was interesting about this relationship is that Sergeant Joubert was a warder, remained a warder, and I was a prisoner. And he didn't break any rules in what he did for me. But sometimes, even if you are entitled to some things in prison, you don't get them. We were entitled to receive a certain amount of sugar, a certain amount of bread. Sometimes some of that would be stolen in the kitchen or by the warders. Or we were entitled to studies at certain times. Sometimes we didn't get it, or they took their time about it. So, and in the case of this Sergeant Joubert, what he did is he ran a shop in the prison, and we had money. We didn't have money the first time I was in, but when I was an emergency, state of emergency detainee, we were allowed to have money. I mainly used, the main reason for me to have the main advantage was that originally, in the beginning, they didn't allow us to have newspapers, and I used to use the money to smuggle with the ordinary criminals who were there. I was not supposed to have contact with the ordinary criminals, but I did have contact, and I would give them money. They would get dacha, but they would get me a newspaper. Sometimes the warders also smuggled for them, and one day a warder would be a warder, another day he'd come as an awaiting trial prisoner because he would be caught smuggling. Now this Sergeant Joubert, he retired as a warrant officer. He's just basically a decent human being who had the power to purchase things for me, and he took trouble over it. If he went to Pick and Pay or wherever he went to buy fruit or dried boerewors, if it was not good, he'd come back and he'd say, look, it wasn't good, I'll go back again later today or tomorrow. So he was, he said to me when I met him the other day, hey, when I think about being in prison, that was leerlik, it was ugly. And he thought being a prisoner was terrible, and his job was not to make things more difficult for me and for others. You see, me mainly because the others were released long before me, and I was the only white who was left in detention. But what I did allude to, there are different types of warders. It's also different being held by the police, because when you're held by the security police, these people are very politicized, and they politicized in a way which is very opposed to me, so that they were vicious. Not always, because if they didn't need information from you, if they knew everything, all the people, then they just charge you. But in the state of emergency, what they did is they, two of them interrogated me, and they had 2 tape recorders there, very ostentatiously. And they were wanting to bring a charge, I think, of treason or something like that, because around what I had said and written about popular power. Now, they did later charge Moses Mayakiso and other people from Alex with that, but they were not able to quite catch me on that one. So that, but they had these long interrogations, which were quite interesting, because the way they interrogated me was much more advanced from when I was first in. There wasn't time for ideas when they're busy beating you up. But the second time, it was sort of serious. They knew what I'd written. They remembered things I had written more than I did. Anyway, the police are the worst, but then there were warders in Pretoria the first time I was in who were specially trained. They were trained that they couldn't say anything to us about politics, especially when we were not allowed to have newspapers until about 1982, after about 7 years of my sentence. And we used to try to get news out of them. You know, for example, make them angry, you see, and then if they get angry, sometimes something comes out that they don't intend to say, and then you pick up something has happened. Also, we could tell when they behaved in a very angry way that something must have happened, that they were angry about. Something may have been blown up. Or there was this Springbok rugby tour of New Zealand, and the one game was stopped. That day, they were so hostile towards us. We picked up later what it was, but you know, you knew something's happened because they're treating us worse. And then you have these ordinary but even those warders, police are very fit and they are aggressive and all this. Prison warders are not very energetic. You know, they get told they must search us 3 times a day. They do it for 1.5 days, and then they just lose their energy, you see. And then they go and sit down. And a mature warder, a seasoned warder, I think was seen as someone who knew how to sit and do nothing. And that was how most of them were. Now, but then when I went to Diepkloof prison, where I met this Sergeant Joubert, they were ordinary criminal prisoners there, and they're not supposed to talk to me at all. But these warders were not, they didn't want to land in trouble, but they didn't stop the ordinary prisoners from talking to them, and the big gangsters actually ran the section, because what the young warders felt is, if they don't have a good relationship with the big gangsters, they're not going to clean the section properly, then they're going to land in trouble with the major or someone like that. And consequently, they ended up doing things which got them into trouble, like smuggling, and then they also landed in jail themselves. But those warders, really most of them, they didn't give me a hard time. One of them explained to me that I was different from the others. With these people, he says, the ordinary criminal prisoners, I say to them, fuck off into your cell. With you, it's the United States, the United Nations, and the Supreme Court, you see. So, I don't do anything like that. And one of these warders, he was actually a member of some right-wing organization. He was actually secretly smuggling a newspaper to me every day. Didn't give it to me, gave it to this one criminal prisoner, and I would get the newspaper. I learned from the criminal prisoner that was coming from this chap. They didn't want any trouble with me, because they thought, first of all, they also respect someone who's been in before. You know, not just the prisoners, but also the warders, the captains, all of them. They think, this chap, he knows what's going on, and they don't just look for trouble. Anyway, so if you take the meaning of the word Ubuntu to mean your humanity is dependent on treating other people as human beings in their own rights. What this Sergeant Joubert did was he treated me as a human being who deserved concern as a human being. Afrikaans word is menselijkheid. And that is the version of Ubuntu that I would advance. And it's, so that is what I didn't use the word Ubuntu, but it is similar to having that in mind.
So does this experience, have any wider implications in terms of building common values?
Yeah, you know, when we speak about the future and we say we're living in a society which is violent and where people don't care about one another, people steal from the poor and what have you, the fact that you do have some people who care is a resource that we need to use in rebuilding our country. This is one example. If you look around you, I've said this before, if you look around you in this building, in the streets, there's some people who don't care that some child is going to run into the streets or that some old lady has fallen over or whatever it is. The others who do care. So these manifestations of caring about other human beings are a resource that we must build on in trying to reconstruct South Africa as a humane society. And that is what is important about it. When I met with this chap, I was completely relaxed. And we have spoken on the phone since then. And I don't have any, I don't know what his political views are, but we have a common humanity. And that common humanity must be respected and built on.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crema Media's Polity about Ubuntu between a warder and a prisoner.